All right, in other news, Russia has conducted fresh strikes on Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia region. Ukraine says Russian forces carried out 567 attacks over the last 24 hours.
Ukraine and Russia are exchanging fire on multiple fronts. Bridges are being destroyed, cities are burning, and oil depots are under attack. On the diplomatic front, US President Donald Trump has issued a 10-day ultimatum to Russian President Vladimir Putin.
What happens when one of the tallest skyscrapers in Moscow's financial district becomes ground zero for a robotic strike? At 3:11 a.m., a drone slammed directly into the Moscow Federation Tower, shattering glass across blocks and igniting questions that Russia's defenses were not ready to answer. How did Ukraine's unmanned systems bypass one of the most guarded air defense networks on Earth? And what did it mean when the Kremlin realized their capital was no longer out of reach? Stay with us. We're unpacking the moment Moscow discovered vulnerability in its own heart. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now back to the video. Moscow's air defenses were built with one mission in mind: destroy anything large, fast, and high-flying before it even got close. Systems like the S-400 were designed to intercept ballistic missiles coming in at hypersonic speeds, while the Panzer launchers sitting on rooftops were supposed to swat down incoming jets or cruise missiles.
Ukrainian regions, including Zaporizhzhia, Kharkiv, Kherson, and Mykolaiv, have reported injuries from Russian attacks. Ukraine and Russia are exchanging fire on multiple fronts. Bridges are being destroyed, cities are burning, and oil depots are under attack.
Biggest Russian drone and missile attack of the war. Ukraine says Moscow fired 550 drones and 11 missiles overnight.
Billions of dollars have gone into these layered screens of radar, anti-air missiles, and interceptors. Every major avenue of approach to the capital has been wrapped in protective rings, as if no object could move toward Moscow without being seen. So how did a handful of drones, small enough to fit on a car trailer, skim just above the trees and punch right through the country's most prestigious wall of defenses? The answer came sharply into focus at 3:11 in the morning, when a Ukrainian-operated drone slipped quietly beneath that radar umbrella and smashed into the Federation Tower in Moscow's financial district. In seconds, glass erupted across the skyline, alarms blared from neighboring offices, and millions of Russians woke up to the reality that their capital was not untouchable. This was no random incident. It was a methodical strike that exposed an ugly truth sitting inside the Russian defense grid. Radar arrays tuned to hunt high-altitude threats can be left blind at ground level. Low-flying drones create a nightmare for radar operators. The arrays stationed around Moscow are excellent at painting a clean picture of aircraft flying from thousands of feet up, but they do not filter out the noise of buildings, billboards, and trees when searching near ground level. A drone riding only 300 feet off the deck appears on radar screens as just another piece of clutter. And when dozens of decoys spread across the sky in every direction, operators must decide in seconds which signal might be real. That guesswork is enough to open a corridor, and that corridor is all the strike drones need. Russian crews working that night described chasing mysterious blips and trying to intercept what looked like incoming swarms, only to discover they were wasting precious interceptors on nothing more than cheap distractions. Dozens of targets seemed to appear at once, yet only one was real. In the radar rooms, confusion multiplied. Tracking screens flickered with false positives. Operators ordered engagements against shadows while the real drones crept silently around them. That was Ukraine's advantage. Instead of leaning on raw firepower, they forced the defenders into paralysis by overwhelming their perception. These decoy drones were not elaborate machines. Simple GPS waypoints and off-the-shelf navigation chips guided them directly into firing zones. They had one job: draw attention, soak up ammunition, and frustrate operators until the actual weapons slipped past unnoticed. And it worked. While Panzer batteries spun to target drones that would never arrive, the strike drone locked its path onto the Federation Tower and delivered its payload. The secret behind this success wasn't just the weapon's payload or range.
All right, in other news, Russia has conducted fresh strikes on Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia region. Ukraine says Russian forces carried out 567 attacks over the last 24 hours.
Vying to step up attacks in response to increasing Russian offensives. Over the past 24 hours,
to Russia launching a massive aerial assault against Ukraine, the biggest since the invasion more than 3 years ago.
It was the disciplined use of layered deception. By firing not one drone but many, and mixing real threats with disposable toys, Ukraine forced Moscow's billion-dollar network to chase ghosts. For residents of Moscow, the image was chilling. A skyscraper torn open in the same city supposed to be the most heavily defended on Russian soil. For military analysts, the deeper shock was clear. These systems were optimized for Western bombers and ballistic missiles. They were not ready for small, buzzing machines skimming rooftops. When Ukraine pulled back the curtain, it showed how easy it might be to bend an empire's defenses against itself. The strike was not about blowing out the glass of one tower, it was about embarrassment. The Federation Tower symbolized Russian wealth and global ambition, and suddenly it stood cracked and wounded. But more critical was the revelation that the capital's air shield was far from airtight. A single drone sneaking through meant dozens more could likely do the same. And that day, the defenders did not just lose materials, they lost the aura of invincibility surrounding Moscow's security. Yet this first strike was only the beginning. It was a test run that sent Russia's defenders scrambling and burning fuel with interceptors on worthless targets.
Rescue workers say one person died and 26 were injured.
At least 7 people were injured in a missile strike, while 2 others were hospitalized, and 23 private homes, 12 apartment buildings, and a post office suffered damage. On the diplomatic front, US President Donald Trump has issued a 10-day ultimatum to Russian President Vladimir Putin.
It was the first cut in a campaign designed to spread alarm across command centers and make planners realize they were hunting phantoms. If Phase 1 exposed the blind spots in the radar network, what followed next showed how even elite forces could stumble when Moscow itself became the front line. The strike against the Moscow Federation Tower did more than damage steel and glass. It forced Russian commanders to disperse elite interceptors and missile batteries across the city, pulling them away from strategic corridors that once guarded command posts and military infrastructure. By shifting defenses inward, Russia thinned protection everywhere else. If drones built for a fraction of the cost can bypass Moscow's strongest shield, what happens when every capital faces the same pressure? Drone warfare has altered the balance of deterrence. But the question remains, are we seeing the peak of innovation or only the start of an arms race above our cities?